All right. Do you need? It's all right. Hey, I wanted to play this for you because I figured this might be a good intro. This is our intro music. The reason why I thought this would be funny is because you should get it.
I get it.
I was thinking about what brings together a preacher and a pawnbroker, and I thought that's a pretty good
Different strokes.
right, yeah.
Yeah,
for sure.
What you going to talk about, Willis?
That's right. That's right. Now I wanted to talk about, so after your sermon this past Sunday, and it seemed like, and if I'm wrong, then let me know. It seemed like it was a little off the cuff. It seemed like it wasn't something you had planned, but you thought, let's do this. And so you challenged the congregation to put down social media for the week. You said things that, I knew, maybe you said Facebook in particular, but things that connect us to the outside world.
Yeah.
I mean, and so you tell me, was it off the cuff? Was it?
No,
kind of,
it was definitely off the cuff. I hadn't planned to ask the congregation to step off of social media and distractions, and I think I said social media, television,
right?
Things that
News,
sort of pull you away. News sites, that pull you away from spending that time with the Lord. Things that tend to be filler for a time, So I wanted.
Yeah, because we had just the sermon was about finding that secret place, the private place, to spend time with God, and so that kind of paired well with it. Because I was going to say, why did you do that? Why'd you ask us to do that?
Yeah, I think at least what I see in my own tendency and what I see in other people is that we tend, with our phones now, we tend to fill time that would have normally been quiet time or just time with our own thoughts. You tend to fill it with either scrolling, searching, texting, calling, something. People get up first thing in the morning, they use their phone as their alarm, and the phone is the first thing they check. Did I get text messages? What are my notifications this morning? But a willingness to kind of set those things aside to be able to listen to the Lord throughout the day, but also to be aware of how much that pulls us away. I mean, I know for me, kind of setting it aside helps me realize how much time I'm spending thinking about mindless things instead of filling that time with what is the most glorious thing in the world, which is the Lord, and it being in His presence and thinking about Him and thinking about His goodness. That's what I should be filling, free time with. Praying without ceasing. These sort of things.
I've often been accused, rightly so, of not allowing pregnant pauses. Like when I'm talking with somebody and I ask a question, or like in our Bible study on Sunday nights with the young adults, I'll ask a question and then I allow about that much time. I don't allow a whole lot of time. And so that's been a tendency of mine. It's funny in the world of sales. I was in sales for a while. And that was a real problem that one of my sales managers had to point out to me and say, listen, you need to stop sometimes and just be quiet. Allow the silence. It's one of the things I see with our technology is that, and I said this to somebody the other day I think it was after your sermon, maybe in that conversation that I spoke to you about, was that you can't have a moment where if you have, I was talking to somebody out in the garage at church, and I said, if there's a moment where the conversation ceases, you can be sure someone is going to pull their phone out of their pocket. And as soon as one person pulls their phone out of their pocket, it gives permission to the other person, and then the other. And then before you know it, you have 3 or 4 people standing around. And what would have been, after that pause, a conversation in the past, and maybe a really good one, now you have 3 or 4 people standing around looking at their phones.
Yeah.
And I think, how did we get there?
Yeah.
How do we get to that point where conversation is no longer just you can't stand to have any moments of silence. Like you said, even moments of silence to ponder, wow, look at the sunset or the sunrise, or instead I'm looking down and giving myself some chiropractic problems with my neck.
Well, I remember, I think it was one of the first semesters that my oldest son was at college, and we went to visit. And one of the first things I noticed was that as students were moving around, I won't say 100%, but say 90%, and that is not an exaggeration, who were walking around campus or otherwise had headphones in of some sort and were most often looking at their phone. And so where, even 10, 15 years ago, you'd walk down the street and you'd at least greet people as you'd pass them, how are you, or a nod or something along those lines. There was none of that. There was just this passing as if I'm the only person, and there's no need to greet you, no need to recognize someone else in my path as a person. Mm-hmm. And it really dumbs down, in some ways, just our humanness of being able to interact with one another, learn cues, verbal cues, nonverbal cues.
That's
other
one
things.
thing that I've heard psychologists say, that this generation, the smartphone generation, is not nearly as in tune to nonverbal cues. Like they don't understand the nonverbal cues that we had, because they don't. And the other thing is eye contact.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's a function of technology, but I think it probably is, because conversations are not nearly as often face to face as they are screen to screen. I'm typing something and sending it to you, and that's an interesting. I mean, you could say that's just a development in culture, and it's not detrimental, but I think it anytime we forfeit human connection, I think there's all kinds of other problems that are most likely going to stem from that.
Well, it's not how we were created to be. I found even in younger generation with marriage counseling, you'll have couples who will get in an argument, then go to different rooms and text one another to work it out. Because they'll say, well, I can't put into words what I really want to say. Wow. And so we'll say something within a text thread that we're not willing to say in person to someone, or uncomfortable to say to someone in person, which again, I think goes.
No wonder the birth rate's down.
Yeah.
You think about all the things that.
If you're making up on text.
I know, right? Good grief. I think, man, where are we headed?
Yeah. And so.
It's scary where we're headed.
You think how God has created us with that need and desire for human interaction, to be able to interact, to hold one another accountable, to walk with one another through some of the challenges of life. And when we don't learn the skills to do that well, and again, I don't want to put off on the current generation so much, but this really is the first.
We're the ones that adopted it.
Yeah, yeah, and they're the ones that have completely grown up in it. Anyone who's 18, 20 years old, this is all they've known their whole life.
Yeah, we created it. I mean, Steve Jobs is a little older than. He's older than I am.
Yeah.
Was older.
Yeah.
Right, but so it's our generation that created it and adopted it and said it's good. And we just talked about this, but just kind of outline again. If in 2000, I think it was 2006. I'm pretty sure it was when the iPhone was introduced. There was, I don't even know if they made any claims other than how neat it would be, how fun it was to kind of. I remember the scrolling screen the touch screen was this new technology that was just fascinating. But if you had taken the consumer in 2006 and you had presented to them all the things that would now be part of our technology in our pocket, the distractions, the constant buzzing, the constant feeds, and this tendency to fill our time with it. Not only that, but just the intrusion into our privacy. That's a whole different story. But if you'd presented that to the 2006 consumer, and what I said was, would we have lined up, or would we have lined up outside the Apple Store and burned it down? Yeah. We just said, no way, no, there's no way we're going to adopt this. And that's probably more of the reaction we would have had is, there's no way we're going to give up this kind of privacy, this kind of even intimacy with our friends, because we constantly have another friend in your pocket talking to you. Yeah. And I think, how do we get there from here? It's the proverbial frog in the kettle, little by little by little. And I wonder if that was the goal all along, or it just happened. But I don't know if you agree with whether we would have lined up for that and said yes, or had a real problem with it.
I think particularly with what you mentioned, the invasion of privacy, there was a sense, that's actually one of the values of Americans as a people,
Right.
is that the right to privacy, the right to have our own home in our possession and have that in a private way. And we are entering a season where the value of privacy is really not held as strongly as what it used to be. I don't think, at least I don't see it. Even in my kids, seeing them, to post things online, they don't have wide social media accounts, but to be free with information in the electronic field is not something that is foreign to them or concerning to them, as much as it would be to me or to like my parents' generation or my grandparents' generation. I can remember my grandfather was like, you don't ever trust the government. Don't ever take anything from the government. Don't ever trust, And
we thought he was crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah. We thought people like that were crazy.
But I think, when you and I think about our fields where God has placed us as a pawnbroker and as a pastor, there are a lot of similarities, I think, in that people are coming to you to get a need met.
Right.
Often people come to the church because there's needs.
And times of vulnerability
yeah. And I think with technology, it is creating a much more vulnerable people, both in terms of spiritual needs, also in terms of financial needs. We've had these conversations of people building relationships with people online that they would never build in a person that they meet directly face to face, but they'll build and create these personas online that end up they get scammed, that cost them money.
I was going to ask you about that because you have a unique kind of insight there. It's funny because I remember I was thinking about how technology causes us to do things or say things or act in ways that we normally wouldn't. For some reason, and this stands out in my head, I remember when I was a little kid, we had a rotary phone in our little farmhouse, one phone in the house, the whole house, one phone, on the wall with a long cord, and you could get maybe to the other room with it. And I think even talking to someone on a phone versus talking to them face to face, you almost take a different persona, right? Yeah. And I remember getting in trouble, which it's so funny that it stands out in my head. It was an invitation that I'd gotten from a girl to go to a roller skating event. And then I realized as I'm talking to her on the phone, and I asked my mom and she said I could go. I'm talking to this girl, and I was probably 8, 9, 10 years old. And she says there's only girls there. And I said, oh my God. I said that. I took the Lord's name in vain. And my mom heard me from the other room. And I never would have said that. But I just had this almost an anonymity, right? Being on the phone over in the dark room, right? In the corner. And my mom heard it and she said, you're not going to that. That's it. Put the phone. She was upset. She was rightfully so. Because I'd been raised better. I'd been raised better than that. But this anonymity I found in sitting in a corner on a phone, right? Yeah. Without looking someone face to face in a dark. And I'm thinking that same kind of anonymity with, a laptop in a corner or a phone now, anywhere you want, you can be connected to anybody in any part of the world. Mm-hmm. What do you see? What do you see as the downfall? What have you seen? Not specifically, but generally, how that has compromised us mentally, spiritually, relationally. And you've seen those, you've heard those stories, and technology is a big player in a lot of that.
Yeah. One of the observations that I've had, just even in terms of being in different places in ministry, we were in Tennessee for a while. I did some schooling in Kentucky and other things. And so you build these networks of people that you are in relationship with. And so what social media did was it brought all those networks to the present in my life or other people's life. So instead of, I used to live in Tennessee and I knew some people there that I may talk to once every 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, whatever. Now it brings all these people continually interacting in a way in which, there's a response. Oh, so-and-so had a baby. I need to comment on it. It's her birthday. I need to comment on that. Their mom died. I need to let them know how sorry I am for that. And so you're pulled in all these different directions with so many different people that, I had a really good relationship with that guy. But what I think the Lord has helped me to understand is the importance of people that are present in real life form in front of me in the network and the sphere that he's placed me. So, and really, I can't say that that's been a revelation that I've had for a long time, but certainly over the last year or so, the Lord really has put within my heart to focus on the family that's in front of me and the people in the church that God has placed me to serve him with.
Right.
And so my attention, my energies, my ability to get to know needs to be focused on that network. And I don't need to think about even family members who I love, but I can't, I'm not actually physically with them. And so I can't continue to build that relationship in a digital way. If I call them once in a while, that's fine. Right. But to try to foster that relationship consistently is really detrimental to all the people that God has placed right in front of me right now.
Do you think it's funny because I think about how, and maybe it's, I don't want to be the old codger that just says, oh, the world's changing so fast and it's going to hell in a handbasket, but at the same time I think about how all communication used to be, and this is just a generation ago, was you could make a phone call, right? But it was most of it was face to face. It was looking someone in the eye, shaking a hand, making a business transaction or whatever. Business transactions were all done face to face for the most part, a generation or two ago. And then it became phone calls, and then it became faxes, and then it became emails, and then it became text message. And I think do you see this degradation in how we communicate? Because you think now it's emojis, and even as an English major, it makes me crazy that even the English language, even the language that I hold dear, and the ability to communicate with someone, is now shortened and messed with, and there's acronyms for everything, and I don't even have to bother saying the word or writing out the word, and we've shortened it. Do you think that changes or degrades the communication?
Of course, yeah. I mean, I do.
Well, you're an old guy like me.
Yeah, but I have to. I mean, even in classes, in an academic setting that I've taught before, I have to communicate to students it is electronic communication, but I have to say.
Speaking of electronics, my goodness, my phone. Sorry,
I have to say, hey, you can't use what we call what is called in that form anyway, net speak. No emojis.
Right.
If you're going to say you, write it out. Y-O-U, not just you.
And and I know you get pushback.
Yeah.
Why do I have to do that?
Yeah.
Why do I have to put a period at the end of my sentence?
Right. And it gets. It's actually interesting. Again, I agree with you. I don't want to be the codger who points back and says, "Oh, everything is just awful." There are some benefits to technology that are helpful, but I also think that you're losing an ability to actually even communicate in language that is meaningful. And so the scriptures God chose to give to us in words that have meanings behind them, and He chose a specific language to give it to us in, or three specific languages, with the Old and New Testament. But thinking, God chose language to communicate His love, to communicate who He is, to communicate His attributes to us, and yet as people and in our communication with one another, we're dumbing it down to thumbs up, heart emojis, high fives, things that, what ultimately does it mean? What does it say to us as a people when we can't, I'm thankful that when my wife and I were dating, I was actually able to write love letters to her.
Right.
Put into words my emotion and feelings for her of love, and that was an important aspect of our early years together.
Did you guys keep those, by the way?
I'm sorry.
Did you happen to keep those?
Yeah, we kept.
Because we have a whole box, unfortunately, in our attic, and our kids are always like, "What's that box?" And we think, "Man, we should probably burn that." But it's a box of when Brandy was in Africa for 2 years. We wrote back and forth for 2 years. We wrote because it was $3 a minute to talk on the phone.
Yeah,
and so I'm very thankful that we had that period of time for 2 years to communicate with handwritten letters. We didn't even have email. Yeah. She didn't have email where she was. So handwritten letters, and I think, yeah, it has changed. And so I don't want to, like I said, I don't want to be the old guy that just hates change, because I don't hate change. I think change is good. What benefits? What benefits has? And I'll say this with a caveat, because people say to me, because I just lost my smartphone 2 weeks ago, just 2.5 weeks ago. Got a flip phone a week and a half ago, and so I'm not tethered to all the buzzing and beeping, and other than a phone call, that was literally a phone call, and so I'm not tethered to that anymore. But I lost my train of thought there.
The benefits of technology,
right.
Yeah.
That's what I was going to say. Sorry.
Yeah.
Is people ask me, how's it going? And I say, I've gained much more than I lost.
Yeah.
I did lose some. I mean, the ability to quickly text someone, right? I don't have that anymore. It takes me forever to try to do it. Or I can just call. I'll just call somebody. If they text me, I'm just going to call you. But so I've lost some, but I've gained much more, And so what do you think? And is there some happy can we, this is the one thing, can we pull back? Because I think most people would admit that there's too much in our pocket. That's a distraction. That's a temptation. That's all the things that we have in our pocket shouldn't be there. Is there a way to pull back? I mean, there's even companies now that are growing out of it, but where do you think the benefits are? And do you think we should pull back?
Well, I think,
or throw them all away.
Yeah. Burn them.
Mm-hmm.
Back in the 80s, they would burn the records. Burn the phones. My opinion on that, and I don't, obviously I'm not a guru. I'm a person like everybody else who has, temptations and whatever else. But particularly with smartphones and bringing a smartphone into my family, I will say this. We have, Nicole and I, once our two oldest children started driving, we got them a smartphone, and I won't do that with the rest of our children. We'll do something that is not as, doesn't open the door to the internet, but gives basic calling abilities just for, security, to know that they're okay and that sort of thing.
Yep.
So I do think in that sense, there's some benefit to technology is to be able to keep in touch in an emergency, to be able to communicate. I think on the church side, it's really nice to be able to keep in touch with key missionaries that you're working with in other parts of the world where that was really not nearly as possible, at least in a real-time way. But now, we can communicate with missionaries in Africa and South America, wherever, and you can get a response pretty quickly. But on the flip side of that, you go to some of these third world countries, and you see everybody has a smartphone. Mm-hmm. And you think, what's it doing to these cultures that we've introduced this into their culture? And you go where there's, little electricity or little good running water or whatever, but a smartphone's available
everywhere
in order to communicate and talk. So, I do think there are some benefits. I don't think there's benefits. The phone has been coupled with the social media environment, and so
where's the benefits there?
Social media, or I think
any?
Decoupling those things is really, and I do think people are beginning to wake up to that, the detriment of social media, child trafficking, the pornography, other things that just warp the mind and can warp the mind at a very young age. I mean, there's schools who are waking up to it now and saying no smartphones in the school at all, which again, I think is important. Yes, there is a good use of technology, but I don't think the social media side of it definitely needs to be decoupled from it.
Yeah.
Because you're creating these alternate personalities that really aren't real. Even when it's a real person on the other side, what they're presenting to you often is not really them. So it's not real.
Yeah. No, that's a good point too, because even when we have real relationships, and I think about Facebook, I think a lot of the Gen Z, I'm Gen X. Gen Z doesn't really do Facebook, but Gen X is all over it. And we want to stay attached or connected to the people that we went to high school with for some odd reason. I don't know why.
Right.
Because I don't know why. In all honesty, I don't know why. People are like, oh, I knew you in high school. I'm like, I'm a different person. I'm not that I'm not that guy.
Right.
I'm not that guy. But we feel this need to stay connected to those people. And I think we're not even seeing the real person. We're seeing when they have a great vacation or a new dog or they had a baby. And that's kind of cool, being able to connect to people that you actually care about. But that's 1 in 100.
Yeah.
Right. And I think even those, it's probably not, for the most part, beneficial, because I'd say as a pastor, you probably have heard stories of people being connected to people they shouldn't, old girlfriends, right?
Very
on
frequent.
Facebook. I know. And I'm thinking about how often that happens.
Yeah.
And you think, okay, that's a reason we shouldn't be on there.
Yeah.
Right? There's no reason why we should be connected to our whole past.
Yeah.
There's probably some
if
real
the Lord
detriment.
forgets it, maybe we should too.
That's right.
The Lord forgets our sins and other things.
That's right.
But I'm sitting here trying to think, and I would say a majority of habits, unproductive thoughts in terms of depression, anxiety, other things. So much of it is connected back to what people are experiencing in an online environment, and then consistently by the phone. Instagram, the Snapchat. There's the other one where somebody snaps a picture of themselves and you snap a picture of yourself. I don't even understand that. I've heard
The whole
about
Be
it.
Real thing?
Be Real, maybe that's what it is.
I was on that for a while
Okay.
with my smartphone because I wanted to see what my kids were doing.
Yeah, and so I don't even, and you're, again, presenting a facade that's not really you. And I think, getting out in the world that God has created. I mean, you've traveled quite a bit. I've had some experience to travel some. And that, I'm not saying that's not all where it is, but getting out in the environment that God has created and seeing His beauty, seeing the truth of what He has done, investing ourselves in contemplating the world around us, how God created it, how it existed, being in awe and wonder. All of those things kind of fall to the wayside when you're constantly tethered to a device that, as you said, tells you what to think, when to think, how to think, where to go, where not to go.
Do you know how many times I've had to ask people? I've been sitting with people and be like, "Hey, what was that old television show or that old book or whatever that said this or that, or where I learned this factor?" And immediately, what everyone does. They pull the phone out of their pocket and they Google it. And I think Google has ruined our sense of recall. We're not even able to recall information. And then you wonder, okay, how does this contribute to, and I am a conspiracy theorist, sorry. But like the Alzheimer epidemic, the fact that we don't even use our sense of recall anymore for the most part. I mean, I don't know that there's probably other reasons for that. But you think about, that's gotta be detrimental to our ability to be able to retrieve information, because we don't even bother. We just say, "Oh, I'll just ask Google. Ask Google." Now it's AI.
You make a really good point there in that, where do we go for absolute truth?
Right.
And so how many people go to Google to find their absolute truth? Or as you said, now with AI, that's where we go to find what is true and what is not. And
that's what Pilate would have asked. What is truth? And he would have asked Google. What is truth?
Yeah.
Right.
But you really, I think, considering the importance of that, whereas, previous generations, even those who were not necessarily a practicing Christian, but there was a sense of morality and you would hear people talk about the good book or things like that. There was a sense that there was these absolute universal truths that guided us as a people. And that's not at all a consistent understanding within our culture anymore. But there is a consistent understanding that, hey, what I see on Wikipedia, that's true, even though it got edited 3 minutes before or 5 minutes before.
Do you remember the scrutiny when we wrote reports back when we were younger? Our reference material, how much it was scrutinized. It really had to be a reference. It had to be, and now I hear about media that references. There's circular references. Like if I said it and I reference someone now if I reference, they can reference me and I can reference them because we both reported it at the same time.
Yeah.
And now there's no primary reference point or whatever you call that, primary source material.
Yeah.
Right. But I just think about even that. You think about this free flow of information and how much of it is actually true or from any kind of primary source. I don't know. Another downfall, I guess, of technology. The one thing I was thinking as we were talking about our kids and when is it the right time, if at all, to present this maybe not social media ever, right? Because I think about what are the benefits versus the risks. And risk benefit analysis, is one of those things that as a business owner, I always do. And it's funny. Sorry, I'm going to one more tangent here. As a business owner, people say to me, "Well, you can't do without your smartphone, right? You got to have it. You got to be able to text. I got to be able to reach it. And I think, well, I'm going to try it. I'm going to try it for a while. And the truth is, of course, I can. Yeah. And this whole lie that we've told ourselves for the past few years that I need to be available right now to anybody who wants to get a hold of me is a lie. It is an absolute lie that I need to be available at any given time. That someone needs to be able to throw a text into my pocket and have me respond within a minute or two. Yeah, is a lie. There's no reason that we live for millennia without that, and we did fine. Yeah, and so, presenting the technology to children. It's funny as I'm a firearms dealer. And people always say, well, do you have firearms in your house? Yes, I do. Well, how do you keep your kids away from firearms? And I think about the dangers of people think that firearms are very dangerous. And I would say to you with total conviction that smartphones have destroyed countless more lives. Yeah. Countless young lives than firearms have. The risk, because we don't see it as a risk. Firearms, the thing is, it's very obvious. There's a bullet that comes out the end. Stay away from it. It's very dangerous. It'll kill you. And we have all these warnings, and rightly so, with training. And that's how I keep my kids safe. I tell them, hey, listen, this will kill you. And I train them and I tell them the dangers when they're very young, show them the dangers, and then they realize, oh, that's really dangerous. I need to stay away from that unless I know how to properly handle it in the right context. We don't do that with technology. And I think, and that's the problem, is that it's the danger to psyche and spirit and even the addiction, the whole idea of a chemical addiction attached to a smartphone. You're familiar with this. Yeah. Yeah. That the dopamine that from just getting a ding or they liked your so-and-so.
That's specifically designed that way, and I don't think that's genuinely from those companies. Initially that's how they were specifically designed, was to elicit a response. Your Pavlovian dogs,
correct.
Getting the ding and salivating. That's exactly what I think the social media companies saw in the beginning, that there was this opportunity to monetize dings and buzzes and other things, and that's what's happened. Again, whether they could foresee exactly how everything turned out, I'm not sure. But I don't think we can generally say that the individual person has benefited from having instant access to social media and instant access to such a broad range of information that has been helpful. It's like, we'll play Scrabble sometimes at home, and my kids will sometimes ask, "Oh, how do you spell this?" And I'm like, go get the dictionary. Go get something, look it up for yourself, figure it out for yourself. But they want that instant, because I'm instantly here. I'm instantly here to spell it for them. I'm instantly here to tell them. It's work to go find the dictionary. It's work to look it up. And we appreciate and desire that instant gratification. And that's what social media often provides. Again, there are some benefits probably, but I think, like you said, I think it's really good to put it in a business sense for the individual. What is the cost benefit analysis? Are we getting more return than we're putting in? And I don't think we can say that with the unfettered access to technology. And again, I will guard my younger kids much more than I did my older ones.
Yeah, no, and I was gonna say, as a pastor then, so what do we do? What do you do as instruction or encouragement to the congregation? Is there any specific? I know we've talked about this in the past in private, but even the dangers of most what I call government schools now, and when people can, and as much as they can, find a better alternative, right? And I think about the same thing with access to technology. Do you give instruction to families? Listen, and do you do it overtly? I mean, do you do it over the pulpit? Do you do it in counseling? Do you listen? We really need to be. This is a danger. This is a hey, put a sign up with your firearm. Danger. This could kill you. Yeah. How much do we do that? And do we treat it like? I was thinking, do we treat it like the church has learned to treat things like alcohol, right? Listen, I'm not saying it's going to kill you. I'm saying that a lot of people, it causes really, really bad consequences. And for the most part, you probably just want to stay away from it.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no redeeming quality. There's very few redeeming qualities that we really can point to. So maybe just stay away from it. Do we have the same approach?
Well, I think that's a really good analogy. There's some people who can take a drink and it's not going to impact them. They're not going to get addicted. Right. They're not going to desire it anymore.
It'll relax them. They'll find some enjoyment in it.
And even some will take the first, take one drink and just never want anything else because they just find, hey, I don't like it. I don't want it. And I think for some people who have, smartphones and computers and technology and social media, that's the way they do it. They're like, I just don't ever have a desire to even be on it.
There are a few of those.
Yeah, it's just...
But I think they're few and far between.
Yeah, it is. For most of us, I think we have to be aware for the majority of the people, there is some type of... can be some type of addictive response that we're using this too much in the wrong way. Mm-hmm. And again, I do see it more in a negative light because of what I see it do to people's lives over a period of time, and particularly in the darker places of the internet that are very unproductive for us, that destroy families, destroy marriages, even with regards to just one-click access to pornography and things like that. I mean, I forget what the age is now when someone's first exposed to pornography, but
I'm sure it's a lot different than when we were children.
It is, but you're actually, the way I see this, you're actually stealing from your spouse because you're creating memories and concepts of intimate interaction that are meant to be discovered with one person for the rest of your life, and yet you're seeing it acted out by really unreal people on a screen and trying to import that somehow into real life, and it destroys. I mean, it's just such a destructive force for what God has created as intimacy between a husband and wife, and the picture of Christ's pure, beautiful love for his church, And I think, again, some people say, well, I don't want to over spiritualize that. And, I don't necessarily like using those words because we live in a spiritual world. Yes, it's real, and yes, there are things that are tangible. But there's also very clearly a spiritual world at work, and the enemy of our souls seeks to destroy everything that is good and precious and beautiful. And he doesn't just seek to destroy it when you turn 18.
Right.
He starts at a very young age working to destroy what God has created as good and pure and beautiful. And that's where I think, just even like looking at your picture up on the wall of the Grand Canyon, I guess is what
That's
that is.
called Monument Valley in Utah. It was awesome.
And so I think
me and my boys riding our one wheels together.
I think so. For someone to step out and look at that and to see, imagine not having a picture of it and visiting for the very first time and laying eyes on it for the very first time, and you think the beauty of what God has created for us to enjoy.
Yeah.
But we lose so much of that because I've seen you go there. I saw another friend go there. I saw somebody else go there. I saw your pictures. I saw this. I saw that. It's not new. It's not discoverable anymore.
Yeah.
And that's the same thing with intimacy and other things that we experience online in a digital way. When it comes to the real thing, it's not new anymore.
I've heard psychologists talk about the there's been all kinds of things I've listened to lately and heard psychologists give input in how technology has kept us away from nature in particular, like the health benefits of walking through a forest.
Yeah.
And it's funny because they can quantify these things. Yeah. And what it does to chemical levels in our body and
your
even
mental health.
It was crazy. It's crazy that the things you learn about just getting outside really. And I think about how much time technology steals from doing physical activity. Like when I was a kid, you just think, it was someone recently was talking about boredom and how boredom is good. Boredom fosters creativity.
Yeah.
Right. And you think we don't allow ourselves anymore to be bored, right? Because what do we do if we're bored, or if we just have a tinge of boredom? We jump on we just scroll on whatever on our phone instead of thinking, what could I do with my time? Hey, there's something over there. I remember when I was a kid, you'd go looking for something. And sure, you get into trouble, break bones and get stitches.
But you learn.
But yeah, exactly. But boredom fostered creativity. And you think, okay, then what are we doing to all these creative juices that we're stifling? Where's the next entrepreneur that would have invented whatever, would have,
Wright brother, what if they had consumed by technology, but
exactly.
They worked at it.
So what do you think if you could snap your fingers and smartphones went to if every smartphone disappeared out of our pockets like that? What do you think would happen? I just wonder, would we have a bunch of people that would just go crazy, or would maybe just for a minute and then realize, wow, what we've gained is so much better than what we lost? But what do you think families, what would change in the family? What would change in the church? What would change in society? What would change in business?
Well, just from the first thing that comes to mind as you mentioned that is, I think groupthink would largely disappear. So you'd have more
that is a real problem.
Yeah. You'd have more individualism,
Or smaller groups.
Yeah.
A small group, and you really have to wrestle with things face to face.
You think? I mean, you mentioned, I don't have any scientific data to back this up, but think of just the polarization in politics. That's probably mainly been in the last 18 years, 20 years.
For sure.
Before that, I mean, you obviously had your big differences and other things between political parties or whatever, but
they, for the most part, didn't hate each other.
They didn't. Yeah.
It was Republicans lived next to Democrats, and they're a Democrat. Yeah, I don't really agree with them on something, but it wasn't this hate.
But now it's like you're evil. You're,
right.
If you don't think like I think or perceive things, or you hate, this person or that group or whatever. And there's this group think, whereas when you get to know a person, even if you disagree with them, there is a personal quality to that, and particularly for the believers, thinking whatever this person does in private or in public, they are still created in the image of God, and I have a responsibility to respect that image of God in them. Whereas when I'm dealing with someone in the digital world, I don't even think about that.
Have you ever thought about how, okay, so it's funny that I've never really thought of it this way until we brought up this lack of maybe human connection with technology, and how groupthink gets out of control and people get into really crazy, I don't know, just being able to be influenced by groups that they wouldn't have before. Have you ever thought about the scripture that says the eyes are the windows to the soul? And we've always thought about that as what I let in to my eyes impacts my soul. But I also think looking at someone face to face in their eyes, you look at them in a different way than if you're not seeing them face to face. You are seeing a person and you're realizing, like you said, this person was created in the image of God, right? And when I talk to them, I need to respect that, or need to at least be aware of the fact that I'm talking to another created being. God created them, and he breathed the breath of life into them. But when we're just touting our opinions are online and shooting off, I don't even I've never done Twitter, but tweets and things like that. We're not even bothering, maybe considering, because we're not looking at the person face to face. We're not looking into their eyes and perceiving that soul in them.
Yeah.
That it's a very different relationship.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And I think, for Christians, again, particularly recognizing that they are an image bearer gives us a different perspective. Even when someone may be accusing us of hate or, whatever, to look at that person in the face and say, God has still called me to love you and to respect you as a person. He will determine your eternal destiny just like he'll determine mine, and I'm comfortable with that. And ultimately, I want you to have a place with Christ, but if you refuse that's on you. But until he makes that decision, my responsibility to you is to respect his image that is within you. And so I'll respect the image of God that rests within you, even if you don't respect it yourself. But again, I think the online environment has created this almost Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. We're different in person than we are online, and we can get in your face and say things in an email or say things on social media or whatever that just really, but then that also reveals what's in our heart.
Yeah, it does. What's
in our heart comes out in a way which is kind of unfettered, which ought to really, I think, concern us.
Yeah, agreed. Well, I think we should all give up our cell phones. Smartphones in particular. Well, yeah. I've got to tell you, I've moved to a flip phone, and I enjoy it. I do have access to email and text in other places, but
how's that been for people around you, like your family and others, in terms of wanting to get in touch or anything? Have you had any disruptions?
No. And what I realize is the truth is, I used so much of the unproductive pieces of a smartphone. I like to think that the smartphone made me productive, but the truth is that, and you get it if you allow it to send it to you every week. It was always on a Sunday morning. It would always be during church. Your screen time this week was, you averaged so and so, and some weeks I was like, you've got to be kidding me, and I don't consider myself a scroller and always. But sometimes it was 2 or 3 hours a day, and I'm thinking, oh, that's very disappointing. That is really disappointing. And so what I realized when I got a flip phone was, because the time I spend doing anything with my flip phone may be half an hour a day, because it's a few little texts, reading a couple texts and making a few phone calls. And what I realized was the lion's share of the time that I spent on my smartphone was doing very unproductive things. And I thought, and I told you, I'm reading books. Like I loved to read. I loved to read prior to my smartphone. It killed that joy in me. And I think, man, that makes me angry. I want to go back to 2008 and throw away my iPhone.
Yeah.
Right. And I think, and everyone after that, but I got to get the 16 because now they have the 16 out.
Yeah.
And you think, man, and it's only $1,000, Robert. You think, what in the world are we doing? What are we doing? Anyway, so I would encourage people to get a flip phone. I think it's been good for me. But
yeah. So what would you say? I know you want to.
No, it's good. I'm good.
But what would you say? If you could kind of articulate the benefits over this last week and a half, what have you seen? What's kind of stuck out to you? 1, 2, 3, maybe.
It's interesting that I feel like I have more time in the day. That's a strange thing to say because I think, okay, one of the things that I've noticed over the last few years is have you had people say this to you? Do you feel like time's speeding up? It's literally speeding up because I was wondering. I've actually said that to people. Do you think time is actually speeding up? And what I've found over the last couple weeks is I felt like time slowed down a little bit.
That's great. Yeah.
And what I realized is it's because I've taken the time captive a little bit more and not let it just go through my hands like sand.
Yeah.
Because it does that when you're scrolling. Scrolling is. I remember watching a documentary about Facebook. I think it was called the Social Network or something like that. And it was talking about the scroll. Like there's no bottom to it. There is no bottom. Like you can scroll endlessly. It's
Bottomless
infinite.
pit.
It's infinite. It is infinite. And you think
that's biblical.
Yeah, right. I know. But it's this infinite and you think that is a great way to let time just go through your hands like sand. So that's if there's one thing that I've noticed is that I have more time, and I'm enjoying reading. I'm really enjoying reading, which is a love that I kind of had lost a little bit. The other thing is I'm not texting as much, and so I told people, I said, listen, when you text me, if you get a yes or a no or a maybe or a talk to you later or I'll call, then we'll talk. But I'm not bothering with that. And for the most part, I think I feel more productive. I mean, whether I am or not, I feel more productive. I mean, this has all kind of taken shape. The fact that we're gonna try this podcast thing out, this has taken shape as a result of the fact that I feel like I have more time, and I'm a little bit more creative. I feel a little more creativity. In all honesty,
if you were to say, hey, I'm going to go back, what do you think your wife would say?
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know that. See, for the most part, my days are spent in my office, and I have the freedom to be productive or unproductive.
Yeah.
And I don't think she sees the unproductive times as much. But the truth is, at home, I know she sees it because that was always a frustration, not of hers, but she was a lot slower to adopt an iPhone. And that's funny because I see her on her iPhone now, and I'm like, I feel like
judging. You're not judging, are you?
Exactly. Like I no longer have a lit up face, in the dark, whatever. I think she notices it at home, for sure. Someone said the other day, and we have 4 kids. We have 2 still at home, and someone said I was hearing on a documentary, a podcast, or something, that the lion's share of your relationship with your children is when they're adults. They're adults for most of your relationship with them, and so how critical it is to capture those years when they're not, when they're children. And you still have that influence. They're still under your roof. You still have influence. And I think that's probably my biggest indictment on the smartphone is the fact that it's a thief of time. It steals time from most people. I would say there's probably not a single person with a smartphone in their pocket that would not admit that it steals their time. Yeah. And I think there's nothing more valuable that we have, especially if you're a family man or if you're an employer, it steals our time, and I think that's quite an indictment.
Yeah.
So, Yeah, I think that's probably one thing. I've kind of reclaimed my time.
That's good.
That's been good. Yeah. So I'll expect next time we get together to hear that your smartphone's also in a ditch in the countryside in Pennsylvania.
I have to get a
somewhere.
motorcycle.
That's right. That's right. It's a
Hit a
story
deer.
for another time. Next time, I think we're going to talk about what I'd like to talk about is the joy of routine.
Huh?
I know it's funny because we were talking about creativity and boredom, but how routine creates the joy of discipline, right? The joy of routine, the joy of discipline, the joy of doing things on a schedule and finding real productivity in that and joy in that. So I think next time we'll talk about that
Good.
if you're open to it.
Looking forward to it. Yeah.
Awesome. All right. Well, thanks.
Thanks.